Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today our message is on Parashat Miketz, and I entitled it Say No to Assimilation because we're also in Hanukkah now. So, over the past 60 years, I've peeked into so many religions and various ideologies. I spent a little time in some while I delved more deeply into others, starting with, believe it or not, the modern day religion of medicine, which states that doctors mustn't be questioned or challenged. This holds true for any system that leaves no room for scrutiny. Ah, truth. How can we know what is true? Is there ultimate truth? Now, truth has been losing ground in today's world, where the forces against it create an illusion that lies can be accepted as truth. Some of these come in the guise of half-truths and appear so nice and so beautiful, so loving, but their deceptive roots are soon revealed because of their consequences. But I thank God for the men and the women throughout the ages who have had the courage to stand up and speak truth against all odds. We're in the holiday season. On one hand, we have Christmas, the other hand, we have Hanukkah, and both are considered to be the festival of lights. But will the true festival of lights please stand up? Now, Christmas is, although it's been changed today, but it's basically based on the story of the birth of a special baby boy in Bethlehem. He was called the Savior of the world, and he has been compared in many ways to Joseph, who is in this week's Parashat Miketz. Joseph was an Israelite who suffered so much, but after all his suffering, he was elevated and he became second in power to Pharaoh alone. He was considered by the Egyptians to be the son of the god Pharaoh, that is, the son of God. His name was changed to Zaphenat Paneach. Even his 10 brothers, who were sent by their fathers, their father Jacob, to buy food during that great 7-year worldwide famine, didn't recognize him because he spoke Egyptian and he was dressed like an Egyptian. He spoke to them through an interpreter. When these brothers stood before their unrecognized brother, they bowed low to the ground, which fulfilled his dream. But they weren't bowing to a god. They were bowing to show respect to a very powerful individual. This paints the picture for another Israelite who was born many years later, over 1700 years ago, on the first day of Sukkot. He was welcomed into the community as a Jew when he was circumcised on the 8th day on Shmini Atzeret. His name was Yeshua ben Yosef, after his father, Yosef ben Eli. And like Jacob's son Joseph, Yeshua was transformed into a god-like figure. And this happened during the reign of Theodosius, the Great Roman Empire in 379 CE or AD, and was given a new name, Jesus Christ. Our Rabbi, Percy Johnson, whose Hebrew name is Netanel ben Yochanan, may he rest in peace, our Rabbi taught us to love and honor the teachings of Yeshua whenever they agreed with the Torah given to us by Moses, the written Torah. It was only Moses who is said to have spoken panim al panim, face to face with God. No one knows where Moses is buried because he too would have been made into a god by the people. Imagine the throngs visiting his grave to pray for a miracle. This is a natural tendency in humanity. Are we following the God of Israel and celebrating his festivals with a capital F? Or have we accepted a human being as a God and are celebrating his festivals? This past week I was listening to President Trump promised us a glorious, healthy, and happy and prosperous future, and he's a friend of Israel. My first thoughts was, that is great. We need a strong man to put a halt to the terror that's been increasingly paralyzing the world with fear over these past several years. We desperately need someone strong enough to free the hostages and to curb the craziness of this woke mentality. He and his wife Melania wished everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And then he delivered a message about Jesus Christ being Lord and Savior. That woke me out of my reverie. Since our last exile, after the destruction of the Second Temple, we Jews have experienced the best of times and the worst of times, living under Roman rule in all the countries in which we have lived. The bald eagle is the national symbol of the United States, just like the ancient Rome, like the eagle of ancient Rome. The strength of President Trump reminds me of King Darius, who helped Nehemiah rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. But I had to remind myself, let's not grow too comfortable with a man's promise to protect Israel. For only God is our protector, and men ultimately cannot be trusted. Israel was safe in Goshen as long as Joseph was on the throne. But when a new Pharaoh rose who did not know Joseph, that's when the troubles for our people became manifest destiny. It's all part of God's plan. The same cycle has repeated over the millennia. We prosper, we grow comfortable, we forget our God. A leader arises who at first tries to assimilate us to their culture, their religions, their gods. But when that doesn't work, because there is something in our neshama that won't allow the majority to turn to other gods, the nation that was harboring us became our taskmaster and our prison, even looking to our annihilation. And that's what we see with the story of Hanukkah. For those who consider the writings of the Hebrew prophets to be true, we know that the last great kingdom will be God's kingdom, with his words coming forth from Jerusalem. No religion will rule the world. It will be God himself, the master of all creation. We can't convert to him like converting from one religion to another. And we can't force others to. You can't force people to believe things. God is the only one who can open our hearts. And then we begin the lifelong process of learning to trust him and to love him. And when we disobey his principles, his warnings, we're the ones to suffer the consequences. But that doesn't mean that he stops loving us. The idea of a God-man is in total opposition to the first commandment given to Moses at Mount Sinai. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then it says, Lo yihye lecha Elohim acharim al panai, which when translated literally means, you shall not place other gods al panai, upon my face, upon God's face. We cannot cover the essence of the Borei Olam with anything or anyone. And if anyone knows the consequences of breaking God's commandments, it is his chosen people. It starts with us preferring to be like the other nations instead of being or lagoyim, a light to the nations. Are we still trying to be light? Are we still trying to be like the other nations, especially at this season? What does the Christmas season mean to most Jews? Some choose to put up a Hanukkah bush instead of a Christmas tree. Others give their children gifts for 8 days in competition with the one. Can we celebrate both? Isn't that an oxymoron? And aren't we playing games with God? We have Hanukkah parties, we eat fried foods, latkes, donuts, sufganiyot, we give gifts, gelt, money. But we don't teach that we light candles for 8 nights because when it was Sukkot, the Israelites didn't have their temple. It had been desecrated by the Greeks. And only after the Maccabees won it back was it rededicated and cleaned up for us to finally be able to celebrate God's festival, his Moed, Sukkot, an 8-day festival. And where can we find the real story of Hanukkah? It's not in the Jewish Bible. It's in the Catholic Bible or the apocryphal writings. Why? Who decided where this story should be? Shouldn't we read it so that we can know the true story and not the made-up one that glorifies a miracle about oil that lasted for 8 days? If we want to talk about a miracle of oil, let's go to the story in 2 Kings 4, where our prophet Elisha used a single jar of oil to save an impoverished widow from having to sell her sons as slaves. The Hanukkah story in the book of Maccabees recounts how after the death of Alexander the Great, one of his generals inherited the territory that included Israel and imposed himself as their king. It describes his dilemma about how to control a people who wouldn't assimilate to the Greek gods and their depraved culture. But there have always been people in our history who prefer to cross that line, including me, until I knew better. In 1 Maccabees, it says that a group of Jewish renegades preferred the Greek culture, saying, "Come, let us ally ourselves with the Gentiles surrounding us, for since we separated ourselves from them, many misfortunes have overtaken us." It's not easy to follow God's principles. It requires us to make difficult choices each and every day between doing the right thing and the wrong, between taking the hard way or the easy way out. And God is constantly trying to get our attention. And hopefully, in this day, there are enough righteous men and women who are willing to do whatever it takes to turn the tide of evil and injustice and return us to a just and godly society. Whether that happens, I don't know when. At the time of the Maccabees, the Jews who wanted to hold fast to the Torah suffered tremendous pain and loss. Women who were found with their circumcised son were murdered along with their babies. Torahs were burnt. It was a horrible time. Antiochus was attempting to annihilate the Israelites. When one man stood up, the Kohen Agadol Matityahu, who said, "Even if every nation obeys him, conforming to his decrees, I, my sons, and my brothers will still follow the covenant of our ancestors, and may heaven preserve us from forsaking the Torah and its observances." How can you and I be a modern-day Maccabee? How do we say no to assimilation? Can we celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas? How can we give Yeshua his rightful place amongst the forefathers of Israel, not as a god, but as the Hebrew man who changed the course of history? Even the calendar date is based upon the year of his birth. He made the Torah universal for all peoples. You know, the Bible is still on the bestsellers list, even though it's misunderstood and misinterpreted, added to and taken away from. It's a real dilemma, and I don't have the answers. We each need to look at our situations and deal with it as best as we can, without compromising our relationship with the one and only God of the universe for all humanity, while not becoming arrogant or feeling that we are holier than thou. Yeshua was written about in Matthew 5:14-16, when he said on the Sermon on the Mount, "You are the light for the world. taking that from Or Lagoyim, our role. A city built on a hilltop cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp to put it under a bushel. They put it on a lampstand, on the menorah, where it shines for everyone to see, everyone in the house. In the same way, your light must shine in people's sight so that seeing your good works, your good deeds, they may give praise to your Father in heaven. As a lover and follower of the Torah, Yeshua was bringing his people back to their role of being Or Lagoyim, a light to the nations, so that we can all live in peace and harmony. That's the message of this season. Joseph went through all his trials and tribulations so that he could save the world around him at that time. Yeshua did the same in his day. They both represent the people of Israel, whose role it still is to save the world, not to subjugate it or to rule over it, as some are accusing us of. Joseph lived his first 37 years being humbled before he could be used to save the world that he knew, the world of Egypt and those nations around him. You and I may not be called to save the world, but there's a beautiful phrase in Judaism. If you save one life, it's as if you save the world. That we can do. In Israel, they say Chag Urim Sameach, Happy Festival of Lights. Let us each work on increasing the light within us by being obedient to God's commandments, and that will exponentially spread light throughout the world. Chag Urim Sameach, and Shabbat Shalom.